The woman behind the desk at Mercy Health's billing office had been pleasant for about 11 minutes before she stopped being pleasant entirely. Her name was Irene, according to the laminated badge clipped to her cardigan. She had pulled up my account to sort out a $200 discrepancy in my Medicare supplement premium. The same $200 that had been quietly wrong for 3 months, and that I had finally decided to drive 20 minutes in February sleet to correct. Small problem, the kind that used to be easy to fix. Irene's fingers went still on the keyboard. "Mr. Holloway," she said, and her voice dropped in a way that had nothing to do with the people waiting in the chairs behind me. "Could I ask you to step around to the side office?" I had spent 31 years as a rural mail carrier in Grover County, Tennessee. I had delivered bills, condolence cards, first day of school photographs, and once, a small package that turned out to contain the ashes of a man's deceased greyhound. I knew when someone was composing themselves before saying something difficult. Irene was composing herself. I followed her into a room the size of a large closet. She closed the door. She turned the monitor toward me slowly, the way you turn a bad X-ray toward a patient. "This account is attached to a secondary payer," she said. "A trust. Do you know about it?" I told her my wife had set up a small life insurance trust before she passed. Mabel died 4 years ago February. Breast cancer, swift and merciless. She had been organized in everything. Our wills, the car titles, the house deed. I assumed the trust was part of that. Irene pointed to a number on the screen. 11,342,000 and some change. I looked at it long enough to count the commas. There were 2. "That belongs to me?" I asked. "Your social security number is listed as the primary lifetime beneficiary." Irene had the careful voice of someone who had delivered difficult news before, but I suspected it was usually the other kind of difficult. "The trust holds commercial property assets. It looks like it originated from your wife's estate." Mabel's father had owned farmland outside Knoxville. 60-some acres her grandfather cleared, and her father worked until his knees gave out. After her father died, Mabel inherited it. By then the county had rezoned it twice, and a retail developer had been circling for years. She sold a portion for what we thought was good money, enough to pay off the house and help our daughter Clarice through law school. The rest she placed in trust, she told me, for our old age. I had believed that trust held maybe $200,000. Clarice had handled the estate paperwork after Mabel died. She was an estate attorney. It was, she said, the least she could do. I had been grateful. Grief had made me useless for months. I couldn't read my own mail without sitting down. "Who controls this account?" I asked. Irene looked at the screen. Her jaw tightened. "The acting distribution advisor is listed as Clarice Holloway Pruitt." My daughter. I asked Irene to print whatever she was legally permitted to share. While she worked, she asked whether I had an attorney. I told her not anymore. She paused before her next question. "Is there someone you can call? Someone outside your immediate family?" That question settled somewhere cold in my chest. I drove to the parking lot and sat in my truck with the engine running. The sleet had turned to freezing rain, and it ticked against the windshield in a way that reminded me of Mabel tapping her fingernail on the kitchen table when she was thinking something through. I thought about calling Clarice. My hand moved toward my phone twice. Both times I stopped. Clarice was 43. She had her mother's dark eyes and her mother's ability to make you feel, in any given conversation, that she was the most reasonable person in the room. After Mabel died, she had driven up from Nashville every other weekend for the first year. She organized the estate. She handled the property tax adjustments. When I struggled to navigate the online pension portal, she took over the login. When my checking account started showing lower balances than I expected, she explained that Mabel's ongoing expenses, the final medical bills, the estate fees, the trust administration, had consumed most of what I thought we'd saved. I had believed her because I was 62 years old, and I had just buried my wife of 38 years, and I needed someone to believe. I found Edmund Greer in my contacts. Edmund had handled our wills with Mabel. He was a soft man with a gray mustache and an office above a dry goods store in Carlisle that smelled permanently of cedar and old paper. I had not spoken to him since Mabel's funeral reception, when he had gripped my hand and said something kind I couldn't remember now. He answered on the second ring. Edmund, it's Alden Holloway. The pause was long enough that I checked the signal bar on my phone. Alden, he said. His voice was careful. Where are you right now? Mercy Health Billing office parking lot. Are you alone? Third time someone had asked me that in under an hour. Yes. Don't go home yet. Come to my office. Park in the back. Edmund made coffee and listened without interrupting. When I reached the number on Irene's screen, he set down his cup. I knew about the trust, he said. I did not know about that balance. Mabel's father's land had been worth considerably more than either of us understood. The developer who bought the main acreage had converted it into a mixed-use retail corridor that now hosted 3 anchor stores, 14 smaller tenants, and a medical plaza. The trust had received annual lease distributions for years. Good investments had done the rest. After your bypass 4 years ago, Edmund said, Clarice sent me a letter terminating my services on your behalf. I'd had open heart surgery the same month Mabel died. The timing had been almost grotesque, recovering from a triple bypass while planning a funeral. I had no memory of asking Clarice to fire Edmund. I tried to reach you, he said, twice. The first time she told me you weren't receiving visitors. The second time the number had been changed. My phone plan. Clarice had moved it to a family account for convenience. Edmund slid a document across the desk, a letter printed on plain paper with my signature at the bottom. The handwriting tilted wrong. I have always slanted my letters slightly left. This version leaned right, as though someone had copied the letters without understanding the motion. She forged it, I said. Edmund did not say yes. He said, we should assume nothing until we verify everything. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. Courthouse, he said and answered. He listened for 2 minutes. When he hung up, he placed both palms flat on the desk. A petition for emergency guardianship was filed this morning, he said. Clarice is the petitioner. Progressive cognitive decline, inability to manage finances, unsafe living conditions. I had walked into the billing office at 9:45 to dispute a $200 error. It was now 11:20. My daughter had filed papers to have me declared incompetent. The same morning I found the trust, I said. Edmund nodded once. I did not shout. What I felt was something closer to a door closing behind me, the soft, certain click of understanding something you cannot ununderstand. My phone buzzed. Clarice. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. Daddy. Her voice was warm with the particular warmth of someone who has rehearsed warmth. Hector and I have been trying to reach you all morning. Where are you? I told her I had errands. In this weather? A small laugh. You should have called us. Hector was her husband. He ran a commercial contracting company called Pruitt Development and had the easy confidence of a man who believed every room he entered was waiting for him. Mabel had never said she disliked him. She had simply gone quiet whenever his name came up in certain contexts. Clarice, I said, did you file papers with the court this morning? The warmth left her voice the way heat leaves a room when the power goes out. We can talk about this Sunday. Which question would you like to answer first? The court filing or the trust balance? Silence. When she spoke again, the voice was attorney measured. You've been talking to someone. Daddy, I am trying to protect you. That's all this has ever been. I ended the call. My hand trembled. I pressed it against my thigh until it stopped. The most important thing Edmund told me in the next 2 hours was not about the trust. It was about Leon. Leon was my son. 39, lived in Reno, worked maintenance at a hotel casino. He and I had not spoken in 3 years. After Mabel died, there had been a dispute. I believed Leon had pressured her to change her will in his favor during her final weeks. Clarice had shown me emails to prove it. Edmund slid a document across the desk, a certified mail receipt. Leon sent this to the trust company 18 months ago. He was objecting to Clarice's appointment as distribution advisor. He cited that the trust required 2 independent physician certifications for incapacity. I had open heart surgery, I said, not dementia. Exactly what Leon argued. Edmund paused. Heritage compliance officer opened a review. 6 weeks later, he was terminated in a merger restructuring. Clarice presented the new officer with altered documentation and a second medical opinion from a neurologist named Dr. Arvid Holt. I've never been treated by anyone named Arvid Holt, I said. Edmund looked at me over his reading glasses. I thought about Leon. I thought about the last time I'd seen him, at the airport 3 days after Mabel's funeral, when I told him I'd seen the emails and wanted him gone. He had stood at the terminal entrance with his hands at his sides and said, "Daddy, please, just let me show you." I had walked back to the car. Edmund drove me to Leon's apartment himself. It was in a complex off the interstate that looked like every other complex off every other interstate. Beige, functional, slightly tired. Leon's truck was in the lot. He opened the door in a work shirt and looked at me the way people look at things they've given up, expecting. "Leon," I said, "I was wrong." He didn't move for a long moment. His eyes went to Edmund, then back to me. "What happened?" "Your sister filed for guardianship this morning. I found the trust today. I looked at my son, who had his mother's cheekbones and my father's square jaw, and who I had sent away at an airport, because I had read emails I never thought to verify. I know enough now that I should have come sooner." Leon's jaw worked. He stepped back from the door. His kitchen table was covered in papers, labeled folders, call logs, certified mail receipts, bank statements I didn't recognize, the same way Mabel had always organized things. "You kept all of it," Edmund said. I knew someday she'd go too far. Leon pulled out a chair. He did not look at me when he answered. "I just didn't know whether you'd still be talking to me when it happened." The email Clarice had shown me read, "Clarice, Dad has no idea what this land is worth. Help me get the shares before he wastes everything on her medical bills." Leon placed a second page beside it, a server log, time-stamped and notarized. The actual email, pulled from his sent folder during a formal investigation. "Clarice, the trust protector, should be someone independent, not you. Dad needs to understand what this land is worth before anyone makes decisions he can't undo." Two characters changed in the sender display. A mirror address that looked like Leon's but wasn't. Clarice had created it, sent herself the altered version, and saved it for when she needed it. "I tried to call you," Leon said. His voice was flat, not angry, which was worse. "Sent certified letters, drove up twice. The first time you were supposedly in Nashville visiting her. The second time Hector met me at the driveway. I had been home both times. We worked until almost midnight. In the morning, we drove to the trust company's regional office, where the compliance officer spread 3 binders on the conference table without being asked. The first binder showed the trust's growth. When Mabel died, the commercial property holdings were valued at $4.2 million. The retail corridor had expanded. Lease income had compounded. A second parcel, which Mabel had retained and which I did not know existed, had been sold to a medical group for cash 2 years ago. $11.3 million total. The second binder showed distributions. Clarice had established a company called Crestline Property Management. For 38 months, the trust had paid Crestline $12,000 monthly for beneficiary support, services, and property oversight. $12,000 a month, $456,000. I had never seen Crestline's name on anything I signed. There were also charges for senior living consultation, transportation coordination, and estate planning review. Each expense was labeled as beneficiary care. The third item was a pending transaction request. Clarice had submitted it the previous Thursday. The trust was being asked to purchase a commercial property in Maryville for $3.1 million from Pruitt Commercial Holdings, Hector's company. The property was independently appraised at $1.4 million. "She filed for guardianship because this transaction closes Monday," Edmund said. "If she has a court order declaring me incompetent," I said, "my objection means nothing." The compliance officer nodded. He was already filling out an internal hold form. Clarice called 3 times that afternoon. On the 4th call I answered, because Edmund nodded. "Daddy." The warmth was gone, her attorney voice now, careful and precise. "Everything I've done has been to protect you. The trust is complicated. You were recovering from surgery. Someone had to manage it." "For 38 months, I said, at $12,000 a month. A pause. "Crestline provides real services." "Name 3 it performed last month." Silence. "Come for Sunday dinner," I said. "Bring Hector. We can talk through it at the table." Edmund put his hand over the phone. "This is dangerous, Alden." "Let me hear what she says when she thinks she's still winning," I told him. Clarice arrived Sunday at 6 with Hector and a bottle of wine she knew I didn't drink. She had dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual. Hector shook my hand with both of his. They were performing the family dinner, and they were good at it. We sat at the kitchen table. Pot roast. For 20 minutes they performed. Clarice's caseload, Hector's Chattanooga project, questions about my woodworking and my truck. Nobody mentioned the trust. I set down my fork. Why didn't you tell me what the land was worth? Clarice met my eyes. The valuation fluctuates. It fluctuated to 11 million. That's a peak number. Clarice, I looked at my daughter, at Mabel's eyes in a face that had learned to use them as a tool. What does Crestline Property Management do? A beat of silence. Hector reached for his wine. It coordinates services, she said. Name one. She looked at Hector. He was looking at the window. I have protected this family, she said, her voice going tight. When you came home from surgery, you could not function. You needed someone to manage things. For how long? Until you were stable. 4 years, Clarice. Hector placed a folder on the table. I had been waiting for the folder. 4 documents. Authorization for voluntary admission to Crestview Village. The senior community she'd mentioned. A durable power of attorney naming Clarice and Hector co-agents. A release of all claims against Crestline. A transfer of distribution authority to Clarice as sole permanent advisor. Signed tonight, she said, and this stays in the family. I looked at the documents for a long time, long enough that Clarice began to relax, long enough that Hector refilled his own glass. I picked up the pen. I signed each line with deliberate care, taking my time. Mabel used to call me AJ when she was exasperated. My middle name was James, and my father's nickname had stuck with her through 38 years. I signed all 4 documents AJ Holloway, not Alden, not the name on any legal document I had ever filed, a nickname that had never appeared on a driver's license, a tax return, or a bank signature card. From across the table, in the low kitchen light, the signature looked plausible. Clarice gathered the papers immediately. I'd like copies, I said. Hector made them at the kitchen counter. Neither of them looked closely at the signature lines. When they left, I sat in Mabel's chair and listened to the house settle. Edmund called at 9. Did you sign? A.J. Holloway did, I said. A long silence. Then Edmund laughed once, quiet and surprised. She called you that every time you tracked mud through the kitchen. Clarice never paid attention to the small things, I said. Tennessee is a one-party consent state. I had kept my phone recording from the moment Clarice walked in. The clearest moment on the audio. It coordinates services, not a confession. But 4 months of discovery would connect that sentence to $456,000 and no verifiable work product. The harder discovery came from Mabel's storage unit. A 10 by 10 space I had been paying $60 a month to maintain because I couldn't bring myself to go through her things. Inside were boxes, her sewing table, her father's tackle box, and an old tablet in a cracked purple case she had replaced 2 years before she died. The tablet held photographs and voice memos. The last one was dated 8 days before Mabel died. Her voice was thinner and slower than I remembered, but her words were as clear as anything she ever said. Alden, I'm recording this because I need you to hear it from me and not from a piece of paper. Clarice asked me last week to move the trust into a new entity she and Hector are setting up. I told her no. She came back the next day while you were at physical therapy. She said you wouldn't understand the details and that I should sign before I was too tired to handle the questions. I recorded that conversation too. It's in this folder, labeled Tuesday. I'm not angry with her. But I am telling you that she has been asking me about the land for 2 years, and each time I said no, she waited and asked again. Whatever papers she puts in front of you after I'm gone, please call Edmund first. Please don't let anyone make you feel small so that they can feel large. I love you. Fix the porch railing before winter. I listened to it 3 times in the storage unit, sitting on a plastic bin with Edmund standing very still behind me. The second recording, labeled Tuesday, was 17 minutes long. Clarice asking her mother to sign, Mabel saying no. Clarice explaining why a private entity would be better. Mabel saying, I know what you want, Clarice. The answer is still no. Clarice saying, Dad won't even notice. Mabel saying, I'll notice. Edmund made 4 copies before sunrise. The hearing lasted 2 days. Clarice's attorneys presented a video from my bypass recovery, disoriented, medicated, calling Leon by my brother's name, asking for Mabel while still under sedation. They presented photographs of my cluttered garage, an unpaid utility notice, a prescription I'd refilled 3 days late. They did not mention that the auto refill had lapsed because Clarice managed the pharmacy account. The independent geriatric specialist Edmund Retain testified that I had full decision-making capacity, no dementia, normal age-related variation. The compliance officer walked the court through the Crestline payments, the altered distribution records, and the voided property transaction. Irene from Mercy Health Billing testified that I had arrived to dispute a $200 error, answered her questions clearly, and asked to understand the account before taking any action. Leon walked the court through the forensic analysis of the altered emails, the blocked call logs, the certified letters returned unopened for 3 years. Then Edmund played Mabel's recording. The courtroom was very quiet during the 17 minutes that my wife's voice explained in plain and unhurried terms what her daughter had been asking her to do. Dad won't even notice. Her voice continued. I'll notice. Clarice sat at the defense table with her eyes fixed on the surface in front of her. When I took the stand, Edmund asked what had brought me to the billing office that morning. $200 discrepancy in my Medicare premium, I said. It had been wrong for 3 months, and I finally got tired of it. His last question was the one the whole room had been circling. Mr. Holloway, without your daughter's involvement after your surgery, what would have happened? I thought about the honest answer before I gave it. I would have struggled, I said. I was barely functioning. I couldn't open mail without sitting down. I needed help. I looked at my hands on the railing. That's why it worked. A stranger at the front door I would have turned away. My daughter already had the key. The judge issued her ruling from the bench. Full legal and financial capacity confirmed. Guardianship petition denied with prejudice. Clarice removed permanently as distribution advisor. Bad faith finding triggered the forfeiture provision Mabel's attorneys had written into the trust specifically for this possibility. Clarice would inherit nothing from her mother's estate. The property transaction to Pruitt Commercial Holdings was voided. The district attorney's office received the court's findings that same afternoon. Clarice caught me in the hallway outside the courtroom. Her attorneys stood at the far end. She walked toward me alone. Daddy, her voice was not warm or cold, just tired. What am I supposed to do now? I looked at my daughter, 43 years old, her mother's eyes, a choice she had made so gradually that I wonder if she noticed the exact moment it became unforgivable. Tell the truth, I said. You start there. Everything else comes after. She looked away. Hector was waiting by the elevator. He had not spoken to me. You're choosing Leon, she said. I'm not choosing anyone. I'm choosing the truth. You're the one who decided those were different things. The criminal case took 14 months. Hector cooperated first, turned over company records, emails, the full paper trail of the Pruitt transaction, in exchange for reduced charges. He and Clarice divorced before trial concluded. Clarice pleaded guilty to financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. Her law license was suspended pending bar review. The sentencing judge gave her 22 months in federal custody and ordered full restitution. The trust recovered just under $900,000 in direct restitution. Legal costs consumed a portion. The principal remained at $11.1 million. Leon drove up from Reno the week after sentencing and stayed 3 weeks. We fixed the porch railing together, the one Mabel had noted in her voice memo. He found dry rot in 2 boards I hadn't caught. We replaced them on a Wednesday afternoon, while a cardinal worked through the bird feeder, and we talked about nothing important for a while. Some days that felt like enough. Edmund helped me establish an independent oversight committee for the trust. 1 professional fiduciary, 1 CPA, 1 elder law advocate, not because I doubted myself, because Mabel had been right about the provisions. With the committee's guidance, I set up the Mabel Holloway Fund through Grover County Community Foundation. It paid for independent legal consultations for older adults facing questionable conservatorship petitions. Irene from the billing office agreed to serve on the advisory board. She said she'd only ever hoped her question, "Is there someone you can call?" had been the right one to ask. It was. Leon came back for Easter. He brought his girlfriend, a quiet woman named Paula, who laughed easily and asked about the cardinal before she'd been inside 5 minutes. We had ham and Mabel's cornbread recipe, and we sat on the repaired porch until the sun was gone. Clarice called once, 4 months into her sentence. She said she had been trying to write an apology that didn't include a reason. Every version came out sounding like an explanation. I told her to keep writing until it didn't. I told her to call again when she had it. I'm still waiting. I don't know what that wait will look like when it ends. I know what I hope it looks like. On the 1-year anniversary of walking into Mercy Health to dispute $200, Leon and I drove out to the old farmland. Mabel's grandfather had cleared it by hand. Her father had planted corn there until his knees gave out. A Walgreens occupied one corner now. A physical therapy clinic sat where the barn had been. The far parcel held a pediatric office with bright paint on the walls and a jungle gym in the parking lot. Leon stood beside me in the gravel turnout and looked at what the land had become. Mom would have opinions, he said. She would have noted every one of them. He put his hands in his pockets. You okay? I thought about the honest answer. I was 66 years old. I drove a new truck. My porch was repaired. My son was standing beside me. My wife's voice was saved on a hard drive in Edmund's fireproof cabinet, and she had called me by name, and she had told me what she wanted, and I had finally listened. Yeah, I said, I think I am. The cardinal landed on a fence post along the road and held there a moment, bright against the gray February sky, before it went.